guys, this is going to be our very first video lesson, and today we're going to be filling out notes 1.9, converting fractions, decimals, and percents. Now, to convert fractions, which we've been studying for the last few weeks of school, all you're going to do is use your calculator like we've been doing before. You're going to take your calculator and you're going to put 3. You're going to hit the division sign, and then you're going to hit 5 and hit equals. What you get when you do that is 0.60. So you're taking the numerator and you're dividing it by the denominator in your calculator. Now, to change this decimal to a percent, you're going to move the decimal to the right 2 places. So we're going to take this decimal and we're going to move it to the right 2 places. I'm going to go 1, 2, and I'm left with percent. Now I don't have the decimal listed here, but really there's an invisible decimal right there, the one that we moved from here to here. Now what happens if we go backwards? Let's say we have something like 18%. So if you remember, the decimal's right here. Now it makes sense that if we're going backwards, we're going to do the opposite of what we did before. So since we moved to the right 2 decimal places to change it to a percent, we're going to move it to the left 2 places to change it back to a decimal. So I'm going to move it 1, 2 places to the left. So now my decimal is 0.18. Now, this part gets a little more complicated. In order to turn this decimal into a fraction, the easiest way is to read it, write it, and then reduce it. Reduce it means simplify. What this decimal says is 18/100ths, and that would be written as 18/100. Now, I know that this isn't simplified. In order to simplify this, I'm going to have to divide it by 2, both the numerator and the denominator. When I do that, I get 9/50. This is the fraction. You can check your answer by doing what we did up here. If you put 9 in the calculator and divide it by your denominator 50, you should get 0.18. If you have your calculator, I'd check that now to make sure, just so you can see. Now, anytime throughout this video lesson, if you have questions or you need something explained further, all you have to do is raise your hand. When you raise your hand, I'll come over to you and I'll give you some help. You can also watch these video lessons anytime you want, so that if you need to review them, you can. Now we're going to complete some examples at the bottom. All we're going to do is fill in this chart. They've got a column for fractions, a column for decimals, and a column for percents. And they give you at least one of each. And what you're going to do is fill in and convert from one to the other. Now in this first blank, what they give you is 0.08. The easiest thing for me to do first is going to be to change it to a percent. So all I do is I move it, the decimal places 2 places to the right, like we did up here, and I'm left with 8%. Now if we want to move back to a fraction, we're going to have to read it and write it again. This is 8/100ths, so we're going to write 8/100. Now hopefully this one's a little bit easier for you to see. They're both even numbers, and the easiest thing to do is going to be to divide it by the greatest common factor. If I divide both by 4, I get 2/25. Now if you divided this by 2, that's okay. You'll just have to do one extra step to simplify. So remember, when you're moving from a decimal to a fraction, you need to read it, write it out the way you read it, and then reduce it or simplify it. Now over here for number 2, they started at 24%. So our decimal's invisible, it's right here. And remember to move backwards. If you look at this little arrow here at the top of the note chart, it tells us that we need to move to the left 2 decimal places to turn it into a decimal. So we're going to take this decimal and we're going to move it over 2 times. So 1, 2. So my decimal is 0.24. It's really not that hard at all. In fact, this should probably feel a lot easier than what we've been doing with operations with fractions. Now, in order to turn this into a fraction, we're going to read it, write it, and reduce it. So remember, this is 24 hundredths. So we're going to write 24 over 100. Now, those are both even numbers, so I know they can be simplified. I already know that the greatest common factor for both of these is 4. 24 divided by 4 is 6, and 100 divided by 4 is 25. So the fraction is 6 over 25, or 6/25. Now remember, if you ever want to check to make sure that you have the right fraction and that you simplified it correctly, all you have to do is put whatever you wrote down into your calculator to see if it matches the decimal. So if I wanted to make sure that I wrote that 24 over 100, what 0.24 is written as, I would divide the numerator by the denominator in my calculator. I would put 24 divided by 100. And then if I wanted to check to make sure that my simplified fraction was the same, then I would take 6 and divide it by 25. And when I do that, I will get 0.24 in my calculator. So let's look at our calculator and see what I mean. So I know that 0.24 is my decimal. And if I want to check to make sure that when I decided that 24 over 100 would be my starting fraction, I'm just going to put 24 divided by 100. When I hit enter, I get 0.24, which is correct. Now if I want to check to make sure my simplified fraction is correct and that I simplified it correctly, I'm going to put 6 divided by 25. When I do that, I also get 0.24, so I know that my answer is correct. It's a really simple way that you can use your calculator to check your fractions to make sure you're writing the right thing down. Because I realize that for some of us, trying to write a fraction from a decimal is going to be the hardest part. So this is a nice, easy way to check your work. Now, 7 divided by 12. That one's a lot easier. We're just going to put 7, hit the division sign, divided by 12, and we'll get our decimal, which is 0.5833333333. If you notice, those 3's, even though they stop here, actually keep going on and on and on and on and on. They repeat infinitely. So what you're going to write, when something's repeating in a decimal, we put a bar over it. So on your paper, what you would write, if you got that as an answer, is 0.583 with a repeating bar over the 3. You only put the bar over the number that's repeating. Sometimes you'll have more than one number repeating, and we'll talk about what happens when we get there. Now, when we turn this to a percent, we're going to do the same thing we do before. We're going to take the decimal and we're going to move it to the right 2 places. So I'm going to go 1, 2. My percent then is going to be 58.3. You keep the bar because we want to make sure we don't lose that bar because that 3 is still repeating, and then you put the percent sign. You have to put the percent sign or else we won't know it's a percent. That's important. Remember, the details are important when we do math. We need to be like little accountants and keep track of everything that we're doing. Now, under here we have 4.5% for number 4. We're going to go backwards this time again. And remember, if you look up here, it tells you, it's got a nice little reminder if you couldn't remember. You can go to the left 2 places. So 1, 2. Now, we're going to the left 2 places, but we ran out of numbers. And that's okay. What we're going to do is wherever that decimal is, if there's an empty space, like here, we're going to fill that empty space with a 0. So my decimal is going to be 0.045. Now, for some of us, we might need a little bit of a reminder when we're talking about decimals. So in your examples column, what I want you to do is, what you're going to do is if it's here, if you have a number here, let's say 2. This spot, is the tenths spot. If it's over here, this is the 100ths, or hundredths, not 100ths, but hundredths spot. Now, if it's 3 decimal places over, so 002 for example, this spot is called the thousandths. So now, what we're going to do is and we won't have many of these in this particular lesson, but if we go over 4 decimal places, this is called 10 thousandths. Now those names don't seem that important, but what these names tell you is what number is going to be in the denominator when you're converting your decimal to a fraction. So if I've got 2 tenths or 0.2, I'm going to put 2 over 10. Now let's go back to our problem. So 0.045. It's 3 decimal places. So we're going to put 45. We can leave off the 0 because it's this third. If we look over here, it says thousandths. So we know we're going to put 45 over 1,000. Now that can definitely be simplified. So the next step is going to be to simplify it. Now if I divide both by 5, which happens to actually be the greatest common factor, I'm going to get 9 over 200. That can't be simplified any further, so that's my final answer. Now, if you look back at number 3, we need to talk about something called approximation. Here, we didn't have to round anything. And here, we didn't have to round anything. But here, we did to an extent. We didn't round anything, but we left off a lot of numbers, right? We left off 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3, 3. When we have to leave off numbers that aren't zeros in our answer, we put this little squiggly equal sign, and that means approximate. Fractions, you would write an equal sign. Certain decimals, only the decimals where we have repeating numbers, only when we have decimals or percents with repeating numbers are we going to use this squiggly equal sign. So make sure that in your notes that you have this squiggly equal sign. If you don't have this squiggly equal sign on problems where we repeat numbers in our decimals. Now, I also want to see this in under your examples column, this whole chart that tells you the different. Now I'm going to skip over number 5 and we're going to go right to number 6. So number 6, we start out at 5/6 or 5 over 6. We don't have to do anything with that. All we have to do is turn it into a decimal. Remember, to turn it into a decimal, you divide the numerator by the denominator. So in your calculator, you're going to put 5 divided by 6, and that will give you the decimal. So in my calculator, if I go 5 divided by 6, oh, it's another repeating decimal. Look at that. This time it's 0.833333333. So I'm going to put 0.833 repeating. Now you can do the 1 or you can do 2. It doesn't matter. The point is the bar. You need that bar over the 3. You don't put it over the 8. It's only over the number that's actually repeating. Now remember, when we're trying to convert our decimal to a percent, we're going to move our decimal place over 2 to the right. So 1, 2. So my percent is 83.3 with a repeating sign over the 3%. Now remember, because we did a repeating, we couldn't write all those 3's because we can't physically write 3 repeating over and over and over and over. We would never finish and there wouldn't be enough paper. You'd probably end up in China or something before you finished, and you wouldn't finish and you keep going around the earth over and over and over. All you're going to do is write that little squiggly approximate sign. Approximate equals approximate. Now remember, I expect your notes to look just like mine. If you need to write anything extra to help yourself, that's okay. Also, remember, you can pause this video at any time and go back and review other parts of it. So let's say you want to go back and review how I did 0.583 repeating, then you would just pause the video, rewind it, and go back. Now, I'm going to skip over number 7. And I'm going to go right to number 8. Now, they give me 0.504. So I'm going to take the decimal and I'm going to move it to the right 2 places. I'm going to move it to the right 2 places to turn it to a percent. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to go 1, 2. So my percent is going to be 50.4%. There's no repeating decimals, so that's an equal sign. Now, notice there's 3 decimal places. And if we look back at our little reminder chart, 3 decimal places means thousandths. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to read this as 504 thousandths. So 504 over 1,000. So what I'm going to do is we're going to simplify it. Now, I know that the greatest common factor for these is 8. But if you don't know that and you want to break it down step by step and starting with 2, that's fine. You're just going to have to take some more simplifying steps. So I'm going to divide both the numerator and denominator by 8. If I divide 504 by 8, so my calculator, if I take my calculator and I go 504 divided by 8, I get 63. If I do the same thing for 1,000 on my calculator, I'm going to get 125. Now, this can't be reduced any further. So remember, always double check and make sure your final answer is in simplest form. Now I'm going to skip over number 9. I'm going to go right to number 10. In the middle I've got the decimal. This time I think I'm going to do the fraction first, just because I want to. So this is only 2 decimal places. So if I look back at my chart up here, 2 decimal places is hundredths. So this is going to be read as 12 hundredths. So we're going to read it 12 hundredths. We're going to write it 12 100ths. And then we're going to reduce it. Now if I reduce 12 over 100, my greatest common factor is 4. So if I divide it, both the numerator and the denominator by 4, I'll get 3 over 25. And that can't be reduced any further, so we're going to leave it like that. Now, I need to change this 12 hundredths to a percent. So I'm going to take the decimal, and remember, if I'm trying to go from a decimal to a percent, I'm going to move the decimal place this way. And if I'm trying to go from a percent to a decimal, I'm going to move the decimal place to the left this way. So 0.12, I'm going to move this decimal place 2 decimal places. So then I've got 12%. Nice and easy. Now, what I want you to do is go back and practice 5, 7, and 9 on your own. When you're done, I want you to raise your hand and I'm going to come and check to see that you're doing it right. Remember that I'm going to be checking your notes in note checks, so make sure that you're writing exactly what I'm writing down, including circling problems 5, 7, and 9. And also remember, you can go back and review things if you need extra help.